Now that the cussing and bleeding part is over with getting into this monstrosity, welcome back to the garage. It's me, Jack, and today we're going to be working on the woman's car. Most specifically, we're going to be working on this power steering pump. And of course, that means we're going to have to loosen up a tensioner, which is kind of buried because there's not much space, to get the belt so we can actually work on the power steering pump, which is quite noisy. She's going to lose power steering eventually. And women don't really like driving cars without power steering, I've found. So we're going to also be inspecting the belt to make sure it doesn't need to be replaced. We're not going to be doing a power steering flush. It doesn't need it. Fluid is good. It's serviceable. I'll probably get it changed within the next 6 months. But it's actually just a noisy power steering pump, and it is going out. Eventually, she'll, again, be left with no power steering and an arm workout. So let me get this car started so you can hear what the power steering sounds like. So as you can hear, it's quite noisy and it tracks with the RPM of the engine, which is indicative of something down here on this, driven by this pulley being faulty. It could be the alternator down here, it could be the water pump down further, or the AC pump, the condenser pump. Yeah, I used an old trick, which is simply putting a, screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, up against the device that I thought, because I don't have a mechanic's stethoscope. Sure enough, the noise is actually coming from this here pump. And as you can see, it is quite grimy. I think there's a small leak on the pump itself. So let me get started. Let's get that tensioner down there and get it, loosened up, and the dry belt pulled aside so we can actually take this pump off. Unfortunately, this doesn't give you a lot of space. Right in here, see? We got the tensioner right here. It's a 14 millimeter socket, but you got the motor mount with the shroud, plastic shroud over it right here. And you got both these hoses here from the power steering reservoir here. Now, there's not a lot of space. I do have a breaker bar with a 14 millimeter socket, but it doesn't fit in that space. Also, that tensioner is inset into it far enough that just a socketed, wrench or a box end wrench or something like that doesn't fit around it. So we're going to make do with my gear wrench with a 14 millimeter socket. We're going to do our best to get enough torque on this thing and pull it off. Now, with a breaker bar ill-fitted on this thing, we are able to somewhat release the tension just enough. There we go. See, now we got it. And now we can go ahead and start working on this guy right here. Okay, now we left the cheater bar there in place. We got our radiator hose clamps. Will actually work pretty well on one of these guys too. But we're going to have to clamp this off, remove with some pliers, remove this off the water pump here. We got to remove this pressure line right here off. There's going to be a new O-ring that we're going to be using, so we're going to be discarding the O-ring. And we got all the tools necessary for this removal section. So, let's get started with that. right. Now that we got this off, now we actually have to remove the power steering pump. Right down in the bottom right here, so you got two 14 millimeter bolts right here holding on the power steering pump. You got one right here. And underneath, right here at the tip of this is another 14 millimeter bolt. And that's how it's actually held on. Here's an example of the new one. We're going to be yanking these plugs off here and capping off these things in a moment. But we're going to, remove this one and pull the old one off and replace it and do everything in reverse, and then check the power steering fluid levels. We're going to bleed the system. We're going to bleed it, and then we're going to make sure it's filled properly, and then we're going to take it for a test drive. All right, now that you can see that we got that thing torqued down, it's not coming off. And, obviously you want to be careful not to shear any bolts off. You don't want to do, you want to do as hard as you possibly can with the wrench, but you don't want it to go too far off. Now, first thing is we got to get this old O-ring. Got to get this old O-ring off. We want to try not to wreck it in case anything happens to the new O-ring. We want to inspect it. It's not in too bad shape. It is pretty hard. Does need to be replaced. Got the new O-ring that I've already soaked in power steering fluid. I'm just going to slip that into place. I'm going to work it back on. I'm going to get the bolts back on it. All right, we got our hoses hooked up back where they need to be. We got our drive belt back on the pulleys as they need to be. Everything seems to be hooked up quite well. Now what we need to do is we need to check the level of the power steering pump. Now we did lose a little fluid because there is fluid that is going to be trapped in the pump. And so we need to make sure that this is filled up to the optimum level. And it does look like they're on the old pump. Right back here, there's a seam. And it looks like on the old pump, there was a bit of a leak, a slow leak. So we're going to check the reservoir and see what the fluid level is and add any as necessary. After that, we need to test the system, which means we need to, obviously bleed it and et cetera, et cetera. So as I'm looking at it right now, it is under the lower level. And we need to have it in between the upper and the lower level. So we're going to use we're only going to use power steering fluid that says it is for Honda and Acura. Honda uses, a much different power steering fluid than pretty much everybody else, and they get it because they got to be special. And yeah, it's a pain. You have to actually find either the OEM stuff that you have to get at the dealership, or you have to find stuff that actually specifically says for Honda and Acura models. Now, this one says ideal for 2007 and up models, which this is a 2012, so we're in good shape. So let's fill it up to in between. Let's give it a little bit more. All right, it's right in the middle. Right in the middle level. Set that aside. What we're going to do is we're going to let this rest for a couple minutes. And then we'll come back to it. We'll start up the engine, and we'll see how it is from there.
One eternity later.
All right, we waited a few minutes. I'm going to check the level. Looks like it's even. It looks like it hasn't moved at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the car on. We're going to run it for about a minute or so, and then we're going to check it out from there. All right, now that we've actually added fluid, and as I can see in here, it is quite stable. It looks good. Doesn't look like we're losing any fluid anymore. It looks pretty even right where I put it. We're going to actually bleed the system. We're going to put the system back, stop to stop, and see how that goes. All right, now that we've done that, we're going to check this level again and see if it's still holding steady. Still holding pretty steady. So we're going to do that one more time. We're going to check that one more time, and we're going to make sure if this is not foamy either. While I'm looking, not seeing any foam here, not seeing any leak here. This is looking nice and clean. No leaks. Good. Take a look underneath the car, make sure there's no leaks. Good. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that procedure. Stop to stop. And then go for a drive. Check it out one more time. Wow, holding steady. Very nice. All right. All right, let's take this thing for a spin and call it a job. All right, it's time to take this thing for a spin and see how this job ended up. Good, crank it up. Man, much quieter, much quieter. Everything working so far. The power steering works terrific. Now I still want to check this car for any leaks on the power steering rack and address that if I need to. So far, so good. There is no issues. I'm driving around this neighborhood really quick at slow speed, just to check, make sure everything's working as it should. Man, so far so good. We'll pop open the hood as soon as we stop, just to check again one more time. Yeah, it's quiet. Check this thing out. Wow. Yeah. So far, so good. Look at that. No issues. Nothing stinks. No leaking right around here. Good level. Well, what do you know? So as you see, there was another job well done. It was a power steering pump. No leaks, no noise. It's a good job, if I do say so myself. Pretty simple overall. It's a power steering pump. It's an accessory item. It's not like we pulled the head, worked on any valves or anything like that, or adjusted cams or any of that crap. But I hope this was useful for you, and if not, buy something else. Or maybe a BMW with Nano system or something like that, or 2 ECUs. Go ahead and do that instead. But anyway, the wife's car is back on the road with no noise, and it is time to close out the video. So hope you found it useful, and we'll talk to you again real soon.